Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, although Kentucky's unemployment rate hit a new record low in April, some companies are still having trouble filling open positions. And 4 people are dead after investigators say their plane veered off course in Virginia.
And we continue to watch the potential for scattered showers into the forecast later this week. Details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Olivia's on the early morning shift. Last month, the Kentucky Center for Statistics released the state's unemployment rate for April, and it set a new historic low of 3.7%. Yet some businesses are still struggling to fill their open positions. As Samantha Valentino shows us, the retail industry is among those with the most projected openings.
KY Stats released their projected total job openings for the 2020 to 2030 time period. The role of retail salesperson had the second most projected openings with more than 76,000.
They're just having trouble finding enough workers to fill slots.
Steve McLean with the Kentucky Retail Federation says filling open retail positions was an issue before the pandemic, but the pandemic exacerbated the issue and the industry is still working to catch up.
Work from home options have grown a lot in the last few years. So if you're someone with young children, you know, the work from home option is something that may be more attractive.
McLean says retailers have increased pay the past few years in an attempt to attract more employees. But with rent and other costs continuing to increase, there's only so much they can do in terms of competitive pay.
They're competing with other business sectors that are also trying to fill jobs.
The National Retail Federation says organized retail crime has gone up 26% in recent years.
Sometimes it's you know, an environment that some people may just not feel safe.
The retail industry isn't the only one that's struggling, though.
There's just not as many people in the job seeking pool, to fill all the available jobs that are out there across the gamut.
In Lexington, Samantha Valentino.
Other jobs within KY Stats' list of most projected openings include fast food cooks and cashiers, waiters, and customer service representatives.
Well, it's been a warm one out there today, and we'll continue to see the mild air as we head through the evening hours. 85 at London Corbin Airport. Yes, the sun is out, even though it looks a little cloudy. But those really aren't clouds out there. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but temperatures remain mild all throughout the region. 78 Jackson, 77 Prestonsburg, and 78 in Pikeville, where we've seen a little bit more of that cloud cover work in. Where we haven't, it's still 85 in London and Manchester. We were up to 86 at one point there in Irvine. Same thing in Harlan. We've come down a couple degrees since then. But yeah, it remains rather warm. Not much in the way of rainfall. We did see a shower up near portions of Lake Cumberland not too long ago. Right now, one south of La Follette. That's headed toward Lake City, Tennessee, and out of the viewing area over the next little bit. But as you head through the evening hours, I can't completely rule a downpour out, but most of us dry and hazy as we head through the nighttime hours, thanks to some of that wildfire smoke from Canada. Mid-60s this evening, falling into the 50s as we wake up on our Tuesday morning. Steve, I'll have the latest on when we see a potential return to some showers in a few minutes.
All right, Evan, thank you. 4 people are dead after their plane veered off course and triggered security concerns in Washington, D.C. Several cameras captured the sonic boom, rattling those in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, and Southern Maryland yesterday. F-16 fighter jets scrambling to intercept a small plane caused the sound. The aircraft flew into restricted airspace over the nation's capital. The FAA says the Cessna left Elizabethton, Tennessee for Long Island, New York, when it suddenly turned around and headed for D.C., then later crashed more than 100 miles away in a remote part of Virginia.
The terrain out here, it's wilderness, is extremely rough, it's extremely steep.
Part of this investigation of looking at when exactly did the pilot become unresponsive and why did the airplane fly the flight track that it did fly? We don't know that information yet.
Aviation experts say the plane could have lost pressurization, causing the pilot to lose consciousness. With the investigation just now beginning, officials say it could take up to 2 years to issue a final report on what happened and why. Police in Dayton, Ohio are investigating a shooting that left one person dead and several others hurt. A 911 call indicated one person was shot multiple times. No other details have been released. Police say this is the third straight weekend of gun violence in Dayton. In the previous weekend, there were 4 shootings in one day. And the weekend before that, police received half a dozen reports of gunfire. The last 3 victims have been recovered from the Davenport, Iowa building collapse. 42-year-old Brandon Colvin, Sr., 51-year-old Ryan Hitchcock, and 60-year-old Daniel Preen were the names of the victims. Part of the apartment building collapsed a little more than a week ago. First responders rescued at least 9 people from the rubble in the days following. At first, authorities said no one else was unaccounted for, and plans were made to start demolishing what was left of the building. But loved ones protested and begged for the searching to continue. Tensions are growing between the United States and China, highlighted in 2 recent close calls. On Saturday, a Chinese warship crossed in front of an American destroyer in the Taiwan Strait, and last week a Chinese fighter jet flew across the path of a U.S. plane, causing turbulence. CBS's Elizabeth Palmer is in Tokyo, Japan, with more.
China's General Li Shangfu used his first high-profile international appearance to address the weekend's incident with some blunt advice for the U.S. Keep your ships and planes away. He was referring to this, a close call on Saturday when a Chinese warship crossed the course of an American destroyer so close it had to slow down to avoid a collision. Last week, a Chinese fighter jet cut across the flight path of a U.S. reconnaissance plane. General Li didn't address the Chinese decision-making that led to the incidents, but implied the U.S. was ultimately responsible. To avoid similar encounters, he said the U.S. should steer clear of the area around China. Mind your own business. But the U.S. sees routine air and sea patrols as very much its own business, where China's flexing military muscle in the Pacific. America and its allies want to underscore their position that this is international space open to everyone. At a banquet on Friday, General Li did shake hands with the American Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. But China had already decided against a formal meeting, something the administration is still pushing hard for in spite of overall chilly relations.
And a cordial handshake over dinner is no substitute for a substantive engagement.
We'll probably see more of that mixed messaging for some time to come, but on a more constructive note, there are 2 administration officials in Beijing right now for more meetings, so it's not inconceivable that we'll see a direct President Xi, President Biden talk sometime later this year. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Tokyo.
China claims the democratic self-governing island of Taiwan as part of its own territory and maintains the strait as part of its exclusive economic zone, while the U.S. and its allies regularly sail through and fly over the passage to stress their contention that the waters are international. Attorneys for former President Donald Trump are meeting with Justice Department officials about the special counsel's probe. Sources familiar with the matter say it is to discuss claims of misconduct from Trump's legal team in the classified documents investigation. The lawyers wrote to Attorney General Merrick Garland last month to request the discussion. Special counsel Jack Smith is looking into whether Trump broke any laws in retaining documents marked classified after his presidency. A source familiar with the situation says a grand jury is set to hear from another witness in the case this week. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a trademark dispute regarding the phrase "Trump too small." The phrase comes from an exchange between Trump and Republican Senator Marco Rubio during a 2016 presidential primary debate. California attorney Steve Elster says he wanted to use the phrase as part of a political commentary targeting former President Trump. Elster wants to put the slogan on T-shirts and hats. His registration request claims Elster aims to, quote, convey that some features of President Trump and his policies are diminutive. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office refused registration, saying the former president would have to give consent for the name Trump to be used. Former Vice President Mike Pence is officially joining the 2024 presidential race. The Federal Election Commission says he filed the paperwork today for his bid for the Republican nomination. Pence is set to formally announce his candidacy on Wednesday ahead of a CNN presidential town hall that evening. This sets up a potential clash with his former boss, Donald Trump. The two had a falling out when Trump tried to cling to power after losing the 2020 presidential election. Coming